Mm-hmm.
Oh.
All right. All right. So we are live, and everybody, thanks for coming in. And especially thank you to David Peck, who is a recent friend of mine who I met at our Hive Life conference. So that's actually one of my favorite parts about the entire deal is getting to meet a lot of interesting people and to learn a lot of things from people from different areas and walks of life in beekeeping. And David definitely lives in a different area and has a different outlook on beekeeping as far as coming from a researching background. I'm trying to definitely learn from you and other people as well, because I would like to understand bees better and research some products. So, David, thank you for coming on, and I'm excited to get to talk to you tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and I'm very pleased to be able to join you and your viewers.
Oh yeah, all us crazy beekeepers. But then again, tell me a little bit about yourself and what got you into beekeeping originally. Was it a family member? Was it just something to agriculture that you hopped over from one thing to the other? What was it?
Well, I'll be honest with you. It was, I appreciate the agricultural side of beekeeping, but for me, it didn't start as agriculture. It started as science. It started as biology. So I'm an animal guy. I've always liked animals. I've always been interested in animals, and so I was studying biology, and I was at school up at Tufts in Boston, and my one of my favorite professors there was teaching a class on animal behavior, and he started talking about honeybees, and he started going on and on about honeybees, and I just got more and more interested. And then over time, it became clear that the reason he was talking about them so much is that they were what he was doing his research on. So I started asking more questions. And then I actually wound up going to the same PhD program that he went to. So he studied under Tom Seeley at Cornell. And then when I graduated, I went and studied at Cornell, although I didn't wind up working with Tom for the first couple of years. So I came out there fascinated by animals, went to study animals, but I was actually studying ticks and mice and things like that. So I was really interested in keeping bees because I found them so interesting. So I became a beekeeper while I was still a tick scientist, and then wound up switching into the bee lab, and I became a bee scientist as well.
Gotcha.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
I should forewarn you, there might be a bit more of that than usual. I tested positive for COVID early this week, and so I'm just getting over it. So I should be okay, but there might be a bit of coughing and sneezing.
Okay. Well, down here, there's a lot of it going on as just from allergies and stuff like that. It is the height of allergy season. And people have told me, well, you just need to eat more honey. Well, nobody that I know eats more honey than I do.
It doesn't protect you enough.
I've got 4 or 5 different types of honey on my table right here. But the problem is the stuff that gets me, like a lot of it is the box elder and a few other types of plants, and they don't really produce nectar. And even if they did, everything that's coming in right now is going into brood rearing and will be burned up by the colony. So I guess I could go in there and maybe swipe a little bit, but there's not much to swipe. It goes into the hive and right to the bees, and that's okay. So my theory is, and this is what I've told Laurel anyways, is that I need to get more hives so they can do a better job handling all that pollen that's in the air.
Right. Well, I think it's fascinating that you've got allergies and you're also a beekeeper, because in many ways there are very limited people who pay close attention to what plants are blooming at any given time of year. But it's folks who are allergic to excuse me. I'm going to be fighting sneezes this whole time, maybe. It's folks who are allergic to the pollen. It's beekeepers who are really interested in that pollen, and it's botanists who are studying it. But everybody else is just living their lives, seeing plants, flowers bloom, flowers die, and that's it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and hey, don't worry if you sneeze a few times or even need to take a slight break. I always can fill the time in with plenty of bee talk. Beekeepers are good about talking bees and all that kind of stuff. So someone actually said earlier that they really enjoyed getting to see you at our conference, and you did a good job, and they're hoping to see you again this year. So that actually will be happening, short of anything crazy going on. And we're going to have David back. He did a really good job for us last year, especially given that he was, what we give you, like a week heads up, David?
When did the conference start? It was Thursday, Friday?
It was Friday, the 7th, I believe.
I
Yeah.
think you called me in a panic on Sunday and said, "I know you're coming down. Do you think you'd be able to give a talk as well?"
Yeah, just why not? Just add a little bit more to your dealio. And so basically, David, if he wasn't up on stage, he was talking and presenting stuff with BetterBee. And for those of you who don't know, David works with the BetterBee company. And explain a little bit about how that works with you all, because there are researchers out there that work with universities, but I'm really not. I don't really know anybody else personally that's working with a company.
Neither
What's
do
that
I.
like?
So my job title at BetterBee is that I'm the director of research and education. And so that means that I'm partially there to teach employees who are new to beekeeping or want to get better at beekeeping. I'm partially there to teach classes for beekeepers. So we've got online classes, we've got in-person classes, we organize, educational materials, we put education in the catalog and education, we make pamphlets and then, pass those around at trade shows and things. So education is a real focus of the companies. And so I'm there sort of as the main hub for a lot of that. But my job is also research. And so in some ways, I'm sort of like a university extension professor, that I'm there, I'm doing experiments, I'm thinking of experiments, I'm applying for grants for those experiments. But if I'm able to, if I've got some free time in my teaching schedule and I can sit down and say, all right, what do I want to study this summer about bees? I'm talking to folks like you. I'm talking to everyday, 1 or 2 hive beekeepers who have questions. And so I feel like I get a lot clearer and rawer information coming to me about what beekeepers are really wondering about, what they want to know about their bees or about a product or about something like that, as opposed to being in the university setting where generally it's, you ask a question at a club meeting and somebody at your club goes to the state meeting and somebody at the state meeting on the education panel, pulls together a list of 4 topics that then they mention to a university researcher. And then they go through those 4, but it gets filtered through a lot of different people, and you wind up with questions that just don't get answered. So I like that I have that freedom and that opportunity.
Bless you. So that is interesting, that position that you're in, and we're really thankful that BetterBee decided to come down this year and take a chance on our very young and new conference. And also when I met you, that position struck me kind of interesting. And I've told you this before, but a lot of people might find this interesting that I've been beekeeping. I'm in my 20th season right now, and I've never purchased from BetterBee before. I'm fixing to change that though. I'm fixing to change that. I actually have some license equipment I am planning on purchasing at the next conference, and maybe some other things as well. Just have them trucked on down. I want one of those lice and honey pumps. Those things look really nice, really nice.
They're very good. They know what they're doing, and the nice thing about Lyson is that, like BetterBee, a lot of them are beekeepers. So they're not just sitting there fabricating stuff out of stainless steel because that's what their factory makes. They're fabricating stuff out of stainless steel, but then they're keeping bees and they're extracting honey. And they're saying, I don't like this design. This isn't satisfying for me to use. And so that's always the way that BetterBee has operated. It's a beekeeper founded company. It's a beekeeper owned company. It's a beekeeper staffed company whenever we can get folks either to either get beekeepers to work for us or get folks who work for us to start keeping bees.
Well, from the outside looking in, again, as being someone who's never purchased, I have never heard a cross thing or an ill thing said about BetterBee over the last 20 years. So either you got people fooled really good or you're doing something right. So that's really good. And I've seen a lot of products, especially now, getting to see some of the license products and some of the other things that you were able to bring down with you. And products like Better Comb, some people are like, well, I don't find that really useful. And let me back up. I mean, I have plenty of natural comb. So for me, I don't really need Better Comb, but just for the fact that there's innovation being done, there's new things and there's creative thought processes. It doesn't mean that every idea is going to be a home run, but the fact that there are new ideas that are focused on helping beekeepers out, that does excite me. And when I saw that the Lyson pump, when my friend Byron brought his over and I compared it to my old Kelly's pumps, where, hey, I mean, they were awesome back in the 70s, bless you. But they man, that thing's so easy to operate and so easy to clean out. And it's a little details that really add up. So I'm hoping that we can get more licensed stuff at the conference this year, and I will help
Oh yeah.
by probably purchasing at least one of the items that at least the honey pump. But anyways, if you don't mind, if this isn't too self-serving, what was your thoughts about the Hive Life conference? And don't mince words. I mean, if there was a few things that you're like, yeah, that could have been improved on, I don't care. I want to know so I can do a better job then.
It was really terrific, and I was really pleased to learn. Everybody talks a big game when they organize a conference, and when we haven't been there to something like Hive Life before,
Sure.
You're always a little nervous. What's this going to be? What's it all about? But you said when you contacted us, said, would you guys like to come? It's really an education focused conference. That's our goal. That's what we're trying to do. Sometimes you go and it is an education focused. And at the same time, from BetterBee's corporate perspective, they say, hey, are we going to sell stuff there? And you say, yeah, it's an education conference, but we want vendors to really be able to sell stuff and make some money and talk to customers and, work with them and everybody comes out ahead. And typically you go to a conference and maybe one of those two things is true. Sometimes it's crummy talks and there's hardly anything to buy and everything's overpriced. And so nobody has a great time. And you have a few good conversations, but what I was really impressed about is that you seem to have achieved both at Hive Life. You aim to really teach people, to focus on education, to give good information. I think you did that. And I think the vending environment is really good. It's a beekeeping shopping mall. You can just walk down and say, I want this, I want that. Do I want your version or that version? I'm going to go try yours and I'm going to try his and I'm going to go home with one of these at the end of the day. So it was very, very impressive.
Well, thanks. And we're going to take that up 10 notches. We are. I'm really excited. Some of the stuff we have in mind. We want vendors to really want to come. We don't want them to say, well, this is just something we do. We want you guys to sell a lot of product. We want you to feel like this is an opportunity, not just to sell, but also to really represent and advertise our brand in a meaningful way that will gain sales throughout the year and educate on new products and spread the word quickly. So, and I think that's important for all of us as a beekeeping community. We have to educate each other. If we want the good, healthy new products or techniques to make impacts and also be produced, and the companies that produce them need to find them lucrative. And it's just the way that it works. And it should work that way. If the product stinks, it shouldn't make money. But if it's great, beekeepers need to get behind it quickly and support it. So we can show companies not only that we want this product, but we also want other products that are along the same lines of basically serving to the beekeepers. And companies that do the best job of that should be rewarded for listening to the beekeepers' needs and getting that.
And I think one thing that's often that folks don't totally understand about the company side of this, and that's something that I've learned moving from doing research and to working at BetterBee, is that these products don't just come from nowhere. That there are people who have good product ideas and they don't know how to turn them into a product. And so a company might help somebody with a brilliant idea, market it and develop it. But there are also folks who have crummy ideas who bring their products all the way to market, and those things then sit there. And there are folks pounding down BetterBee's door every day saying, hey, we've got a crummy product and we want you to carry it because we think that we'll sell it to you for $1 and you can sell it to a lot of beekeepers for $2 and then it'll kill all their bees and then you can sell them a nuke at the end of the season and make even more money. So there's not, I think there are shadier industries, but there's certainly some shady stuff out there. And what I really like at BetterBee is that we turn down anything that looks bad. But if somebody comes to us and says, hey, I don't want this to feel like a commercial, but I do have some Better Comb with me. If somebody comes and says, hey, I've got this product that lets you make a totally synthetic, drawn frame that you can give to your bees and they'll immediately start filling that comb up with honey or brood or whatever you ask them to. As beekeepers, and that's the key, is that, we're businessmen second, but we're beekeepers first. So as beekeepers, we see something like that and go, geez, that'd be really helpful if I needed a bunch of drawn comb to, keep my bees from getting honey bound because we've got a crazy flow on this year, but I just don't have the comb to spare. So we saw that and we said, yeah, this is a good product. We're going to work with, we're going to talk to you about how you can improve your product, and then we're going to market it, and we're going to talk to the beekeepers. And if people come up and say, hey, it's a crummy product, we'll either fix it or stop carrying. But if folks come up and say, hey, I really like it, but I have this idea on how to improve it, that might be printed on the instruction manual, the next batch we ship out a couple months later, because it really is, we feel like we're part of the beekeeping community because we are beekeepers. If we don't carry a product and somebody else does, we buy it, we try it out. And if we like it, then we figure out whether or not we can carry it too.
You said shady things, and that really is very true. There's so many good people in beekeeping. It's a vast majority of people that are fun to engage with and to talk bees with. But there are a good bit of shady people. And I believe the reason for that is because beekeeping is really foreign when it comes to, like, say, chickens or cows or anything like that. Yeah. A lot of people have relatives that keep cows and chickens, or neighbors that do those things. And there are some shady stuff that happens in those industries too. But with bees, it's almost otherworldly to a lot of Americans, just because it's not as permeated into our culture as I think it should be. And so companies and YouTubers and other things as well can really, try to sell misleading information or incorrect information, and people that really don't know better will lose their bees over it. And like you said, buy a package. But talking to you either at the conference or off the conference, out of the conference setting, definitely could tell that you, like myself and Bob Benny and Ian and many others, are really focused on helping the bee industry grow, and from an innovation sense, from an educational sense. And we want to see people buy stuff too, but instead of having to buy nukes every year, how about a license extractor one year, and then maybe a clarifier the next, or something like that, which means
I've had conversations with some folks in beekeeping, and they will say, pretty upfront to you, yeah, I like that they buy my bees, and I'll sell them this Varroa treatment or that Varroa treatment, but I don't want to teach them how to use them perfectly, because I really make the most money when I sell them bees every year.
Sure.
But I think the BetterBee philosophy has always been, and my philosophy has been, that's why I took this job and really like it here, is, I'm going to sell you a nuke this year. I'm going to sell you 3 nukes this year. I never want to sell you a nuke again. I never want to sell you a bee again. Maybe a couple of queens if you don't get into breeding on your own. But I want to sell you those bees, and I want you splitting them every year. I want you buying more and more hives from me. I want you buying a bigger and bigger extracting system over time. But
sure,
you should be able to keep those bees alive, because if you aren't, you're a bee buyer, not a beekeeper. And so our first and foremost job is, if I sell you some animals, I'm not going to leave you to abuse them. I'm going to teach you how to take care of them to the best of my ability. And it's hard. Beekeeping is not as easy as some folks like to say it is.
Yeah.
It's not as hard as some folks like to make it out to be either. You can do it and you can have success, but you've got to be calm and rational and do some research. And if you make a mistake, learn from it. So that's the mindset that we try to share. And I really appreciate folks like you on YouTube who are doing the same thing.
Well, we have got to make sure that and whether it's on, you guys are taking care of your area on YouTube, there are people watching this, and every avenue or area that folks are learning, there needs to be people representing beekeeping in a way that's fundamental and works. People want to keep their bees alive. They want to have success, and we want to see them, because it really impacts all of us. We're all tied together. It's like one large colony, and what affects one affects the other. And so the industry, if it suffers in the hobby group or the commercial group, it really all is tied together, industry as well. So speaking of some of the research that maybe you're doing this year or looking forward to next year, is there anything that maybe you've got on the horizon that maybe you're not working on now, or maybe you are working on now, that you'd like to really test or try out, David?
Well, during a lot of my doctoral work at Cornell, I was studying mite resistance traits of bees, and studying the various mite resistance traits that you find in some of these survivor bee populations. And so I'd like to continue more of that. And that's involved in my participation in BetterBee's queen breeding program. And so I'm becoming increasingly involved in that, and we're going to continue to do more and more testing on those queens and see just how mite resistant a queen we can make using some different selection protocols and paradigms. But I think also a lot, my focus has always been on Varroa. And so in some ways, I'm not really a bee scientist. I'm a Varroa scientist and a beekeeper. And so I'm fascinated by Varroa transmission. I think this idea of mite bombs or robber lures where, bees get sick and then they draw in these robbers that are picking up mites while they're stealing honey, deserves a lot more attention. And I think Varroa control needs more attention over and over again. We were having a product development meeting today, and we were talking about all of the different protein patties that you can buy, all the different protein supplements that folks sell for bees. And, does BetterBee want to make one, or should we work with others? And whose has the best one? And should we start carrying this one or stop carrying that one? And, we started pulling up some papers, and half of those papers, they go out, they do a scientific study, and they say, we fed the bees all of these different kinds of protein. And the best predictor of whether or not the bees did well was their Varroa levels. It's always Varroa. It's if you don't have Varroa perfectly under control, everything else is incidental. And the bees are pretty darn good at feeding themselves. They're pretty darn good at maintaining the temperature of their hive. They're not fantastic at killing this parasite that they've only been fighting for, less than 100 years. And so there's really very, very limited opportunity they've had to grapple with it and to get over it. And so we really do need to be kind of holding their hands and helping them out.
Yeah. We have to be hitting it on multiple fronts, understanding the treatments more, and also understanding ways to impact the mite loads without treatments as well. And
Right.
it's going to take a lot of us. We had a talk at the conference, and you talked about that in your lecture as well, and also during the roundtables, where we have to hit this on all kinds of different fronts and find out what we can do and understand what we have. Because I think with a lot of our treatments, a lot of us don't understand what we have or how to properly use them. I've been beekeeping 20 years, and there's still some of these products that I'm scratching my head on how to apply appropriately, partially because the first time I tried it, I went directly by the label, which doesn't always work everywhere the same way because of humidity and different things. And it really wasn't so much that is like you need to do this once a year. Well, maybe it's once a year in many places in the world, but for me, I needed more mite control. And so just a lot of that with Varroa has been a big issue. I hope that, whether it's a company like BetterBee or whoever it is, we can get on top of this, because it is the biggest problem. Obviously, you, myself, everybody else would love to develop strains of bees that have a large or complete resistance to Varroa, but realistically speaking, it's a very slow process typically to anything like that. And it could be much, much longer than our lifetime.
Right.
But maybe partial resistance. So I was talking to you about this beforehand, that one of the research pieces that we're going to engage in is with extended release oxalic acid. We got EPA approval for that. So that's really exciting. I want to say a shout out to Richard Brickner, who was part of our honey show at the conference, but also is a big help behind the scenes, helping me get some things done here in Tennessee. So with that, we're looking at that treatment as not, this is a treatment we can lean on for major mite reduction, but can we at least get it to where it can hold the mite numbers back? For example, if we wash a 1.5% infestation rate on average throughout the yard, and we apply these a month and a half, 2 months later, will we still have 1.5% infestation? Not necessarily a knockback, but not allowing growth of Varroa as well, which could be a valuable tool in of itself, because oxalic acid is considered to be a pretty clean treatment, but fairly soft as well. So we just need to understand what we have. And I'm not saying that our trial will figure that out, but maybe it will help pave a little bit more of a way. And I know Randy Oliver's doing some more trials this year, and we're going to try to work with, we've been communicating with him in tandem with him. So whatever you guys are doing, if you think that the information would be useful to get out there or could use some feedback or anything like that, I think I've told you before, and I will tell you again that our YouTube channel is one avenue where you can get the word out quickly if you guys feel the need. And we
Yeah,
always
absolutely.
love that kind of thing. So as far as that research goes for queens and things and developing a more mite resistant queen, what do you know about there's different new strains of VSH, and there's also different traits. Your lecture was about wild bees and different traits that they may have. So in kind of in a your lecture was an hour long, but in a kind of a summed up version. And before I get into that,
Now, look, I've got a 100-page thesis over here on my shelf, and the lecture that was only an hour was the summary of 7 years of work. But what in 2 sentences would you like to summarize my thesis? Is that my goal here?
Well, that, but I also want to say, how many slides did you have in that lecture? Was it not like 90 slides? I've never seen a PowerPoint that full.
That is not the longest lecture I've given.
Wow.
But yes, I think it might have been something like 90-95 for that hour-long lecture.
Yeah, my editor for the video really hated your guts, just FYI.
The question, I guess, right? So is what do we know about these wild bees, and what are these different strains of mite resistant bees looking like? And what are the take-home messages that I would offer to somebody? I think take-home message number one is nobody has a mite-proof bee. Because if somebody had a completely mite-proof bee, they would be taking out full-page ads, on the front page of the New York Times, so that every beekeeper saw them, and they'd sell every bee they had, and that would be it. So nobody's bees are mite-proof, but we do have bees that are more or less mite-resistant, and so you can select for the best you can get out of those pools. The next point I make is that there are traits, things like VSH or hygienic behavior or grooming. Those are the traits. Those are what the bees are doing to fight the mites. And then there are tests. And so you can do a freeze kill test with liquid nitrogen and find out how hygienic bees are. Or you can take a pin and you can pin kill a bunch of bees and you can figure out how hygienic they are. But those tests are going to reveal slightly different things, because the pin, now you're getting bee guts all over the caps of that cell, whereas the liquid nitrogen, that doesn't happen. The same is true for some of these VSH tests, is that people are sometimes selecting for the exact same trait, but they're doing a different test. They're using a different assay to figure out whether or not the bees have got it or how much they've got. And so it can get pretty hard pretty quickly to follow exactly what this guy's doing and that guy's doing. My next takeaway, I think, would be, if you are running a queen breeding program and you have decided that you're just going to use one test to select for one trait, you can probably increase the levels of that trait in your bees over time. You can breed for that. That'll work. But that doesn't necessarily give you the most mite-resistant bee. In the same way we were talking about Varroa treatments. If somebody comes to me and they say, hey, I sell this oxalic acid-based product or this thymol-based product, you should carry it. It's the only mite treatment anyone should ever buy because it's so great. I'm going to kick them right out the door, because none of those treatments is the treatment. None of them is the best treatment. There's the best one for me to use at this time based on what I've used last year and what I might be using later this year. So this is the one I'm going to select. It's tools in the arsenal. And I think a lot of these mite resistance traits are similar. So folks who are sitting there saying, I'm going to make the perfect VSH bee, but I'm not going to look at grooming at all. Or I'm going to make a grooming bee, but I'm not going to look at hygienic behavior, are in some ways barking up the wrong tree. They're going to kill their best grooming bees because they're so focused on VSH that they're ignoring those traits. And so what you want is a mite-resistant bee. And one way to get there is to select for an individual trait and hope that trait is the silver bullet. I haven't seen that work yet. Another thing you can do is select for multiple traits, and that's what we're doing at BetterBee. We're increasingly doing different tests on our breeding lines and trying to increase levels of all of those good traits that we know about. Or you can wander out into the woods and you can catch some bees out there. And you can say, hey, maybe these bees, maybe this wild swarm that I caught in the middle of the state forest is going to be more mite resistant because they've been living with mites for 5 years and haven't died yet. Um, the 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 good side of that is there are bee populations existing without Varroa treatment that are able to stay alive. And they've probably, in part, got some pretty good genes that are helping them be a little more mite resistant. The danger is if I took a bee from a survivor population, I've done this a couple of times. If I take bees from a survivor population and I put them in a 10 frame Langstroth hive and I stack box on top of box and I make a bunch of honey and I grow those populations, and then I don't treat for Varroa, they're going to die. And they're going to die because of Varroa mites. Mm-hmm. Because part of what's keeping those bees safe is that if I get a lot of Varroa mites and you get a lot of Varroa mites, we're not 6 inches away from each other. We're 2 kilometers apart. So you and your mites are all going to die, and I'm not going to go pick them up because I robbed you because you were my next door neighbor. Part of it is that those bees are swarming every year, sometimes multiple times a year. And so they get honey bound and they have these brood breaks, and then they swarm. And so they got a long brood break. And that's going to reduce the mite population growth. It's going to give the bees a chance to groom some of those mites off. And so you can't just say some bees somewhere in the world are surviving, therefore I'm never going to treat again. Because it's misunderstanding exactly what those bees are up to. They've got different tools in the arsenal. Sometimes it's swarming and brood break. Sometimes it's becoming honeybound or not being a big colony. Sometimes it's being widespread. Sometimes it's grooming and Varroa sensitive hygiene and these other good traits that they've got. And so just like a good mite treatment protocol involves different mite treatments and different mite assessment, the same is going to be true of a good survivor colony living out in the trees. And so when you bring those bees in, yeah, they might be interesting stock to start with for a breeding program or for your own beekeeping. But don't just assume that everything's hunky-dory and you don't have to think about mites anymore. You've got to go and do the tests. And if you've got high mite levels, you've got to find a way to get them down again.
Well, so that was your 2-minute answer, huh? That's why I like you, David. You are too much like me in the fact that your 2-minute answers are 5 minutes. And, my poor wife lives with that all the time. We did a YouTube video right before we were making some splits, and we had to get the YouTube video done right then because it was just the perfect moment for the video. And we were cutting time to get ready for this right here. And she's like, well, how long do you think this will last? And I said, 8 to 10 minutes. She's like, so 18 to 20 minutes then, huh? And sure enough, I think it clocked in at 17 or 18 minutes. So yeah, but that's why I've got to have her around, to actually have a realistic expectation of what's going to happen. But no, that was a great representation of realistically, I think what is going on as well, just from what I've come to understand from listening to people. It's in a couple of words, it's complicated. It just really is complicated. But where things get dangerous is we get people on YouTube who become famous just for the fact that they put a lot of content up where they, are really good at selling themselves and all those kind of things. So then they can release hey, I've got this right here and it is going to completely eradicate Varroa mites, or I've got these special genetics and for $80 a queen, they can be yours and they're completely mite resistant. But it's a lot more complicated than just that. And we also have to consider, brood times of the year. I mean, up in New York, you guys don't brood near as long as we do down in Tennessee. And I don't brood near as long as they do down in Southern Alabama and Florida, where many places the bees never want to stop brooding. And are we talking Italian bees who want to brood all year round? Or are we talking Carnies or Russians that really prefer and are more sensitive to flows? So there's a lot of variables that new beekeepers don't understand. And I did not understand when I got into beekeeping. So that's why we'd really try to push hard on our end to focus on great queens, dead mites, and good nutrition and monitoring. Monitor, because you really don't know what's going on until you monitor what's going on in the hive.
When I teach BetterBee's sort of what we call the core bee course, which is the 6-hour or so introductory class that we give to people to say, you want to be a beekeeper, listen to these lectures, that's going to get you started. In that course, one of the things that I say to folks is the most fundamental activity of beekeeping is inspecting your hives. Because if you go out to your hives and say, today I'm going to do this to you, and you don't go in and you actually look around and figure out what's going on, you're going to make bad, boneheaded management decisions. And so beekeepers get that. They understand that to be a good beekeeper, you've got to go in, you've got to take out the frames, you look at the brood. Does the brood look healthy? Is the queen laying? Where is the queen? Are there any eggs? Did she swarm? What are they up to? So you're really asking a question of the bees when you go out and get ready to do some management. It's always, how are things with you today? I think that you guys need some more space, so I brought these supers with me. But I'm not going to put them on until I actually check you out a little bit.
Hey, David.
The same is true of mites.
Please keep talking. I will be right back.
Sure thing. Now we're in trouble because now we don't even have a chaperone, so I can say whatever I want. Although I wanted him to hear what I was going to say, so I don't know what it is. I also don't know how many folks are watching this, so this could get really crazy. I don't know if there's 10,000 of you or 5 of you. In any event, what's a good bee story that I can tell you? All right. So BetterBee is getting ready to do our customer appreciation event up here in Greenwich, New York. So those of you that have the ability to get to us on June 25th this year, we're going to have Dr. Kim Skirm, who's the head, I can't remember his title. He's the head chief bee inspector, I think, of the state of Massachusetts. He's going to come out and speak. I'm going to speak a little bit. We've got workshops. We've got the local Boy Scout troop is going to, have lunch available for anybody who comes up. And you can sign up on the BetterBee website and say, hey, I'm going to come up there and see you guys. So it's not a huge, multi-day event like the Hive Life Conference, but it is a fun little activity we put on. And one of the things that we're doing is a guess the weight of the honey super contest, where you come out, you look at the weight, you look at a honey super and you say, all right, how much weight do I think is in that? When we extract it, how much honey are we going to get out? And so folks can go in and make their guesses. And I'm going to give you all some advice for guess the honey super weight contests, for guess how many jelly beans are in this jar contests, for any of those sort of collective questions that you might ask. If you go to an event and somebody says how many X are in this or how much does this weigh, and everybody's putting in guesses, most often the very best guess that you can give is if you're allowed to look at the sheet where everybody's writing down their guesses and you guess the average of what everybody else has said, you're almost always going to wind up on top. And so that's something that I learned in a class with my doctoral advisor, Tom Seeley, which was all about swarm intelligence. So how do swarms of bees make good decisions about which nest box they should go move into? Or how do honeybees make good decisions as a colony about where should we send foragers today? Like which of these flower patches is paying off better? And the answer is there's not, it's not like Aristotle thought. It's not that you've got the queen bee sitting in there calling the shots and saying, you should go this way, you should go that way, I'm in charge, listen to me. There's nobody in charge. There's no individual bee in charge. It's all of those bees collectively working together and individual bees, buzzing antennae against one another. They're actually making those decisions. They're saying, hey, I found really good flowers, so I'm going to dance for 35 minutes in here. I found some crummy flowers. I'm only going to dance for 10 minutes. And that means that more bees are going to see that dance for the good patch than they will for the poor patch. And you're going to wind up with bees that are essentially, making good decisions because they're just listening to that local information. She had good information. She danced longer. I saw her dance. I didn't see her. So now I'm going to go visit those flowers. And so the same thing is true for any of those, guess the weight or guess the number of jelly beans contests, is that my best guess, I'm going to do whatever I can using my tricks to say, all right, well, I'll do some math. I'm going to count, how many I can see on this side, do some multiplication and guess how many there are in the whole jar. Kamon's maybe going to come out and he's going to bribe the guy who filled them and say, hey, how many did you pour in there or something like that?
Sure.
You're going to have a lot of different strategies. And you've got somebody who comes out and doesn't know what they're doing. And they say, I think there's 1 million jelly beans in there. You're going to have a kid who comes in and wants to put in their guess, and they think there's 10 because that's the highest number he can count to. And so you're going to have numbers that are way on the outside, and you're also going to have a lot of numbers that start to get closer and closer to the middle. And pretty consistently, the winning guess of that contest might be 800, But if you took the average of the guess, then, maybe it was 804, and the real answer might be 805 or 806. So
I would just buy
any of those
jelly beans. I'd buy jelly beans of the same variety, put them in a similar sized jar, and then count them individually. And
well, that's because you're a scientist, Kamon.
That's because I like to win. Very, very
well. The easiest answer is just flirt with the person behind the table and see if they're going to let you count up and make an average guess, and that's probably going to serve you well.
There you go. So sorry about that break right there. I usually don't take breaks during the chat, but my son got stung actually, and he's fine. He's been stung since he was less than a year old. But when you hear your son squealing in there a little bit, you just want to make sure it's nothing bad, or anything like that.
Worth some attention.
Worth some attention. So I told him he was going to survive and all that stuff, and he's good now. And normally Laurel would take care of it. She's not here, so it's just me. But anyways, back in business, everyone's still alive. So hey, my dad basically like, no one's bleeding, we're good to go.
Right. And if they are bleeding, they aren't bleeding that much.
It's right. Rub some dirt in it.
Little bleeding's good for you.
That's right. So
we were talking, you asked me about research that I'm excited to do. And then we got talking about different Varroa strategies and chemical control and non-chemical control. And so I do have a product that we're just now carrying that I do kind of want to show off here, which is this. This is a single frame queen isolation cage. And this is something I'm really excited about. I've actually worked with cages like this before. But this is an even better design than the one that I used to use. And because the one I used to use, you'd set this, so I'll take it apart and show you how it works. So, all right, so we've got our cage here. This is just a piece of, basically it's all queen excluder and sheet metal all welded together or bolted together so that you've got essentially a queen excluder in the shape of a frame. So I take a single deep frame, I slide that right down into this. And now, as long as my queen is in there, I've got a queen who's sealed up inside. The old style I used to use, you'd sort of have to slide this lid across that way to lock it in place, which meant if I wanted to take the lid off, I had to pull the whole thing out of the hive, slide it off, manipulate the frame, slide it back on, put it back in. This one just lifts right off. And so now I can put this into a frame or into a colony, and I've got my queen laying eggs just on one frame. And it's the nice thing about this again, it's sort of the BetterBee philosophy, is that some folks had said they were interested in it. We got a good opportunity to carry this, but we aren't saying buy this, it's going to do X for your beekeeping. We said buy this, here's 7 or 8 things that you might try with it. If you are trying to do something where you've got to pull some queens out, but you don't want to have to find them all on that day. Well, now I can go in, I can inspect my bees over the course of 3 or 4 days. Every queen I find, I'm gonna install one of these. Now she's locked up in that cage, marching around laying some eggs. But when I go back in Sunday morning for 3 hours, when I know I've got to find every single queen in the apiary, now they're all locked up. I can find them. The thing I'm most excited about, and that I can't confidently tell you what we're gonna find because I haven't done the research yet. The thing I'm most excited about is the ability to put a queen into one of these isolation cages and impose a brood break on a colony so that I can then go in and do any of a number of different Varroa treatments. And so if I've got my queen, she's only laying eggs in this frame, then I've limited the brood nest. I've limited the places the Varroa mites can go. And so if I do something like an oxalic acid treatment or a hop guard treatment, I might be able to kill more mites than I would. But I haven't removed the queen. I haven't dequeened the colony. I've just limited her. I could also put a drone frame in here. And now my queen is laying nothing but drone eggs because that's all the cells she's got. So they're producing a bunch of drones. The mites are going to go into those drones. And then I'm also going to wind up reducing the brood that the colony's producing. And so now I can go in, I can pull that drone frame out. I can put the queen into the rest of the frame. And now there are 0 capped cells in this entire colony because I pulled out those drone frames. And so it lets a beekeeper do a lot of really sophisticated manipulation inside their hive without just taking a push-in cage or caging a queen in a little California cage and putting her in and saying, good luck, I hope you enjoy being totally confined and unable to lay a single egg for the next 4 weeks or something like that.
Well, you
So
could
you
put
talk
a,
about brooding periods.
yeah.
This is going to let you have more control over that, regardless of what queens are doing or what climate you've got. You can say, look, if I don't want brood this month of the year, I'm not going to have it. I'm going to let you lay in here, and then I'm going to take it away, and then you're going to have nothing left.
Interesting. And I think you can also, as you know, use it for queen rearing. You could put a queen
Yep.
in there and a empty drawn comb. And then now I know these eggs are this day and or around this
These
age.
are
So
65-hour-old eggs, and that's exactly what I want for the graft that I'm going to get ready for. So,
yeah.
yep.
And from, it just makes, so that looks really nice and easy. I hope that you'll bring one of those to at least show and tell at the conference. I'm just
Oh
coming
yeah, I hope we'll have a pile of them, hopefully.
pile of them. That'd be good.
Unless they
So,
all sell out beforehand. That's always the
well,
plan.
well, that's true. You never know what'll happen. So, speaking of, I've had some people ask if BetterBee will be bringing products to sell this year, and I've talked to you about it a little bit, but I think that's the case this year.
Yep, absolutely. We're really looking forward to coming down and coming down in a much bigger way. So, I mean, I don't know how much bigger you can get from David, the one man band, running his
Yeah.
booth and giving lectures. But I think I'm going to have some helpers with me. So there'll be folks there to man the booth, and we're going to bring a whole lot more inventory. I think we're really excited.
Well, have you guys talked about maybe doing pre-orders? Is that something kind of on your
Yep.
radar?
Yep. And so it just depends on what kind of excitement and interest folks have. If people want to pre-order, I think we can definitely give them a good deal on that and let them figure out exactly what they want, and we'll make sure it's with us. But we can also, bring stuff for people who aren't sure about it. Something like Better Comb, if you've never used it, you don't even know what it is. You've got to touch it. You've got to poke it. You've got to ponder it a little bit. So we'll talk to you about it. If you want to buy some, we'll have some with us. But yeah, we're always happy when folks pre-order, because there's nothing worse than, some of this, going to a trade show saying, I'm going to bring 700 deep hive bodies, because I think that's what everybody wants. And you get there and all everybody wants to buy is hive tools, but you didn't bring any. So now you've got to bring all your boxes home and you didn't sell anything. So it's always nice when folks just say, these are the 5 things I want. Can you please bring them and write my name on them?
Well, awesome. I'm so excited to see more BetterBee product. Now, even though I mean you brought a lot of things to show and tell, but there's also a lot of licensed stuff there, over $27,000 worth of licensed products sold at our conference this year, and I'm not surprised. I had seen a 1 or 2 licensed products up to that point, but they are made really nice and with a lot of minor details that are, in my opinion, make major differences on little features that make it easier to use or more convenient. A lot of times it's just functionality, cleaning features. Instead of having bronze gears and a pump, it'll be stainless steel, it'll be a lot easier to open and clean out. Just a lot of little features. I got some questions that people have had for you, David. If you don't mind, we'll jump into some of those. So
if it's not jelly beans, I'm all answers.
Jelly beans. You're on your own on that. I hate jelly beans. There's not a jelly bean in the world that I've ever enjoyed. My brother Ethan really likes them, the jelly bellies, all kinds of stuff. And the problem is he, as a kid, he got me to eat one of those artificial flavored popcorn jelly beans, and it ruined me. It ruined me. I love popcorn. I did not eat popcorn for like 6 months after that jelly bean. It was so nasty.
Yeah, well, childhood trauma will do that to
you. It was some trauma for sure. So one of the questions is about the queen. What's the exact name of that device? Do you have a name for that new queen excluding device?
Yeah, we that's funny, because they said, David, what should we call this? And we went through a brainstorming session. We came up with about 70 different names, and we said, oh, that doesn't work, or that's confusing. That's not quite what it is. And I always struggle to remember exactly what we decided to call it. I believe that we called it the deep frame cage, because it is a cage that a frame goes into. It does. I don't know that it says the word queen isolator in it, but it is essentially a queen isolator, because it's all just queen excluder cage. So it means that you can have a frame that the queen can't get to, or more likely you put her inside and then it's a frame that the queen can't leave.
The deep frame cage
so deep
basically
frame
says
cage
it all.
is the name. Yeah.
Awesome. So someone's asking, is that available now, or when do you think that will be available?
It is available for pre-order, but we actually are not going to be able to ship them until we get them, and that's probably going to be early June, unfortunately.
Okay.
So I will say I think we our first order was 100 of them, and then they're coming to us. I think we've already sold 50 of them. So
Wow.
put your orders in now. We've already put in a second order, and that's going to be maybe another 100, 200 coming in, but that might be July. So
Well, I'll need
we're
to get.
excited about them. We're going to carry them more. We're going to increase our stock, but we just didn't. There was no good source. It's what you were talking about with Lysin, and actually we're working with Lysin to get these imported to the U.S. because we've looked at alternatives and they just aren't made well enough to be worth carrying. A lot of the Lysin, products, you can make a pump out of stainless steel that works really well. And then somebody else can look at it and they can say, "Oh, I could knock that off, but I could sell it for cheaper if I use cheaper cheaper parts, or I cut some corners." And so I think BetterBee's philosophy and Lyson's philosophy is, yeah, it costs more to make it out of stainless steel, and so you're going to have to pay a little more because it costs us more to buy all those parts. But it's going to work. It's going to be easy to clean. Yeah. It's not going to break down and corrode.
I love the fact that lid just comes right off the top, and so you can do your manipulations without having to pull the whole unit out of the hive.
Yes, it's very nice. I will offer one word of warning because I've used cages like this during my research, and it is the only time I've ever rolled a queen. And in that study, I actually rolled 2 queens in these things because it is not a lot of clearance going in and out. So you've got to be, it's like any good beekeeping. You just have to be mindful of where your hands are and what you're rubbing against what, and don't create a lot of friction that there doesn't need to be. So you've got to be very, very careful during that insertion phase because, of course, this is the frame the queen is on, and you're not rubbing her against some bees and some wax on the other frame. You're rubbing her against metal. So you're not going to kill her. It's not the end of the world if you bump her against the edges. But if you're a little clumsy about it, if you're trying to finish up after a long day, you can definitely make mistakes and kill a queen.
Oh, sure. Well, if you got to be careful with that unit, but then again, frames are pretty close together, and you can roll queens that way too. I've done it before, and it stinks, but it's almost always when I was in a rush or something like that, or was not pulling the frame up correctly.
It's never the queen's fault. It's always your fault.
Yeah, that's right. So we've got some other things going on here. I want to say real quick, thanks to Steve Chubb, who donated $20. We really do appreciate Steve and other guys like him who make videos like this possible and education and information available to everybody. And speaking of which, I've had several people message me. This is a little side note here about the conference videos for those who came, the discount code. We have had a really rough time with Vimeo trying to get individualized code so we can make sure that everybody gets a code that works, and it's very easy. And that has been figured out. And Laurel was going to send them out earlier today, but I forced her to split bees with me. So she will be getting
all your fault.
It is almost always my fault. And when it's not, I still feel like it's my fault. But those discount codes for attendees to the conference will be out within the next 24 hours. So be on the lookout for that. So David's got some more questions. A lot of good comments on David's stuff. So there was a question. What's the date again for that BetterBee event that you were talking about earlier, David?
Yeah, so this is the BetterBee Field Day, which we just put on at the Washington County Fairgrounds here in Washington County, New York. And it is June 25th. So it's the last Saturday in June. Let me double check because if that's the 26th, then I'm saying the wrong thing. But I think it's the 25th. Yes, June 25th, last Saturday in June. You can come up here, have some talks in the morning, have some lunch, have some workshops. If you have any orders that you're placing at BetterBee, you can pick them up while you're up here and visiting us and take in the sights.
So I have a question from Gus Mitchell. Dr. Peck, please consider discussing how mites have changed swarming if you think they have.
How have mites changed swarming? If A colony is weakened by mites. They will not be strong enough to grow and cast swarms. And so you would potentially see less swarms in treatment-free sort of wild feral colonies, and potentially even in your apiary. If a colony is too weak to swarm, in the spring, it the swarming in your colonies, or attempts to swarm in spring, is sort of the best endorsement your bees can give you about the care that you've provided. Because if you take good care of your bees, they want to reproduce every year. They want to swarm. And so if they're trying to swarm, it means, hey, you kept them pretty healthy. If your bees aren't trying to swarm, and you're not fighting that swarming and trying to keep it under control, it could be a sign that your bees are weaker than they ought to be. And one possible source of that would be Varroa, certainly. I haven't read much about Varroa selecting for swarmier bees or less swarmy bees. I don't think that the bees are more likely to swarm because that's a trait that's helping them fight Varroa. I think that what's happening is the bees that are surviving, the colonies that are surviving, are doing so because they are living in a much smaller nest cavity, which means that they're getting cramped and crowded much sooner in the spring. They're growing, filling that up, and then realizing that the only way they can grow any further is budding in half and sending out a swarm. And so I think that's resulting largely from the lifestyle of being a bee out in the forest, and not so much that forest bees are under selection to become swarmier and swarmier and swarmier.
Interesting. There's so much to research where we still have plenty of work cut out for us, Dave. And I think that's why I like beekeeping so much, is just from the sheer standpoint is I'll never be bored.
Right. Well, being a bee scientist, I'm never going to run out of work to do.
No,
we're never going to know it all.
But we will constantly keep you busy asking you questions. And here's a couple more. And this one's actually directed towards me, which I'll answer in about 5 seconds. Hey, came into Laurel get her microscope? And actually, yes, she just did. And she is loving it. So as promised, she is going to have to do a YouTube video, which she is now freaking out about. So that was an evil laugh if there ever
it was. And now it's on camera for posterity.
I know. So hopefully she doesn't watch my videos. So I don't have to worry about that. She hears my voice.
Nobody tell Laurel.
That's right. Don't tell Laurel, but she's dreading that. But yeah, she will do it. She'll keep her word. And I'm looking forward to using it for nosema and other bee related things. So that is super exciting. Thanks to everybody who contributed to that microscope. And so getting back,
that was a classic 5-second Kamon response that took a minute.
Yeah, I know. I tried. That was me trying. All right. They have several more questions down here.
Go for it.
And so, okay, Randy the Dirt Rooster's on here. He's driving right now, driving home. Awesome. Good to have Randy. He was at the conference as well. Now, okay, so some of these questions are not directed to you. Kamon, can you ask David if there's a high probability of bees building burr comb against that cage, making it difficult to remove the frame?
I have seen, having used these myself, I have seen burr comb in them before, and you will at the end of a season, have to pull that out and do a little scraping like you would in other cases. In my experience, there are no bee space violations that are so egregious inside this cage that they're going to wind up building a whole layer of burr comb. I probably wouldn't ask my bees to draw out foundation while it's inside that cage. But once you've got a fully drawn comb and you stick it right inside, I wouldn't worry about much burr comb. You'll have little pieces. You might take your hive tool and scrape it out. You'll get a little propolis, you'll get a little burr comb, but they're not going to lock that frame in place unless you leave it in there for 3 months at a time.
One thing that I don't know if you've tried this out, but I've used it on some of my excluders, and not that type of setup, but using a heat gun, nothing that gets crazy hot, but can melt that wax out. So at the end of the season, you're not having to individually scrape so much, and you can just melt that right off of there. And
yet another reason that I prefer metal queen excluders to plastic ones.
Yeah, the heat gun doesn't really work too good on those plastic ones.
Or maybe it works too good.
Yeah, well, it works once. Works once.
The wax is
Um,
gone. So is the excluder.
so is the integrity of the plastics. But I do love the metal quite a bit because they will last and last and last.
Yeah.
The only issue I've ever had with a metal excluder is when I have applied formic acid or oxalic acid right next to it.
Yeah.
It will cause it to eat away some of the metal, and it's still usable, but
Mhm.
it does rough it up a pretty good bit, as fast as anything I've ever seen.
Mhm.
Um, but that probably shouldn't be treating with an excluder on that close to the treatment anyways. I was
Right.
trying something out, and it definitely cooked a little bit of the metal a little bit, just corroded it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Now,
it's stainless, but it's not stainless under any and all circumstances. And hot
oh yeah,
vaporized acid might be one example of where it can't quite hold
oh
up.
yeah, a little bit of formic on anything will formic's pretty rough.
Right.
um, on especially direct contact. So, Gus, in response to the swarm question, said in regards to virgins used to fighting it out. Now I think you see more cast swarms in my observation. So in his observation, instead of seeing so many virgins maybe fighting it out, you see more smaller cast swarms than you would used to. And of course, that's his observation. I wouldn't have an opinion either way on that, but it is an interesting thought for sure, if nothing else, and would be interesting to see some. That'd be a lot of research to figure that one out. But I do. I haven't been beekeeping that long, only 20 years. But it would be interesting to hear some opinions on some commercial beekeepers that have been keeping bees for 50 years or so, and wondering if they have seen more smaller cast swarms, secondary swarms, or whatever.
Right. Right. Right.
So
And
maybe
part of the trouble, I think, is that some of some of the research and our understanding of that cask swarming process is actually relatively new. It's 50 years ago, people weren't hardly talking about cask swarms because they weren't paying close attention. They'd have 10 hives in the apiary, they'd see two swarms, and they weren't quite sure who came out of where when. And
I hate
increasingly,
secondary swarms.
we've learned more about it, and so I think that it's possible that we're just noticing it more because we understand what we're seeing a little bit better. But you're right; it absolutely could be a real biological phenomenon. And I just I'm not old enough. Kamon's not old enough. Hardly anybody's old enough to really confidently say whether there's a pattern. But we've got these old timers, and they must be good for something. So I'd say let's ask. And if we find a pattern, send me an email, call me up at BetterBee, and say, hey, David, it was a real thing. Better do some research on it. That's the most fun way for me to start a research project, is for you to say, I thought that maybe I was seeing something, and I talked to some other folks, and they think they're seeing it too. Either prove us right or prove us wrong.
Yeah, well, there's so much I'd love to know about those kind of things. I hate secondary swarms or cast swarms, basically like what I would call a primary swarm, where the mated queen goes and off, and she'll take 60, maybe more percent of the bees, and they're off. Well, then all the queen cells that are left is where you can end up with those virgins coming on out and swarming in a secondary swarm. And literally, you can have 5, 6, I've seen as many as 9 virgins in a cluster of bees. The problem is the first swarms, it stinks that you lose those bees, but you can recover pretty quickly from that because you have all this brood. If the queens actually fight it out, those virgins, and you end up with one good mated queen afterwards, you still have a pretty respectable looking hive. But when you lose that secondary swarm, then sometimes there'll be a queen left over, but sometimes there won't. And
You can
then,
aggressively deplete what's left after that prime swarm leaves.
yeah, and you don't have hardly any brood left. You could be talking what was a packed double deep of bees is now depleted down to 3 or 4 frames of bees. And that's where small hive beetles can really take over a colony, because there's just not enough bee power to monitor and regulate that entire space. So secondary swarms are awful. I really do not
We
like.
talk about swarming as very new beekeepers will sometimes get confused about swarming. And so, we've got to be pretty strict in our definition. Swarming is when bees leave, they go off to found a new colony. Absconding is when your bees abandon the hive and they all fly away and there's nobody left to take over. The reality, though, is as you're describing, it can sometimes get a little bit blurred, is that sometimes you can watch swarm after swarm after swarm leave a colony and you wonder to yourself, are they all sort of abandoning ship? And even if there are a few bees and even a virgin left behind in this colony, is it possible that they are unlikely to survive because they're riddled with mites, or they've got a bunch of viruses, or there's pesticide residue in the comb, or whatever's wrong with them? But those swarms are really that original colony's best shot at having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 colonies living out in the environment. So it can sometimes be a little hard to say whether a colony that swarms and swarms and swarms and swarms and swarms isn't just absconding the slow way.
It's interesting how different people deal with that. Someone was talking about some of the scat beekeeping in Germany, and they would catch casts, and they'd have primary swarms, and they'd have some casts as well, and deal with it differently. Also, got to keep in mind that that's a totally different style compared to what most of us do with Langstroth, where we're really trying to prevent swarming, where those scat beekeepers actually,
it's swarm based.
Yeah, they were swarm based. And there are some beekeepers that I know with the Langstroth system that really are cool with letting their bees swarm and catching them and making their splits that way. So it is possible. It's a little trickier with Varroa because there's a little bit more work to do. And bees have more pests besides Varroa and other things to consider. But getting to a couple other questions.
Let me real quick, just while we're on the subject of swarms, and because I promise this isn't meant to be a commercial, but I have this sitting next to me and it keeps coming up.
Yeah, sure.
The other cool thing about this cage is if I go out and I catch a swarm and I hive it, I've always got that risk that the swarm is going to take off on me a couple of days later. I've lost a few beautiful swarms that didn't know that they were in a hive. They decided they were still in swarm mode and they flew off and found somewhere else to live. If I catch a swarm and I put the queen in here, she's laying eggs immediately, but she can't go anywhere. And so now I've got this swarm clustered around this frame, clustered around the queen. If they try to fly off, she's locked up in a queen isolator. I wouldn't use this to suppress swarming. If I had a colony thinking about swarming, I don't think locking the queen away is gonna help. It just means they're gonna bully her and try to tug her through this queen excluder material. But if the swarm tried to take off and the queen just refused to leave and was walking around on that frame, this would be another good way that you could more firmly hive that swarm and keep her from going anywhere.
Interesting. Yeah, that could be used in a situation like that where you could just let that swarm impulse die down a little bit, which is really what it is all stimuli. And until they get over that, they're going to be shooting for that goal, whether they can or not. They will do their best to make it happen. So getting to a couple of questions. This one actually was directed towards me about, Kamon, did your mama not teach you that it's not polite to have a hat on indoors? Is that different in Tennessee? That was really a thing back in the day, and I typically try to avoid that. However, my mom and my dad and all those other people didn't have to worry about a conference, a beekeeping operation, a YouTube channel, research, live interviews, and those things as well. And also, I didn't have time to come in from splitting bees and making a YouTube video to work on this mess. So, and also mainly, and see, I say all that, but that's an excuse. My real reason was I was thinking about David because he's bald as heck. And so covering my hair up helps him makes him feel a little bit less insecure about it.
That's true. I do get overwhelmed at the sight of hair. No, I tell you, Kamon, I mean, I always have a good hair day with this hairstyle. So I strongly recommend it.
I mean, it's so consistent. By the day. I also find it interesting how some of the guys I know that are that are bald usually have a nice beard, are able to grow in. Like the guy that keeps asking you questions, Gus Mitchell, he's the same way. Bald, got that beard going on. As far as I'm concerned, I don't care if it turns gray or white as long as it doesn't abandon ship, because my wife says I would look terrible bald. She's like, you don't have a nice round scalp like a lot of people. It's lumpy.
Yeah, head
So
shape is important.
yeah, that's right. So let's get to some beekeeping questions
Okay.
before this gets too far out there. So, but yes, I do have a respectable guest here. And sometimes we don't always get respectable people. We get guys like, we'll get weirdos like maybe Randy McCaffrey or somebody like that. But we do the best that we can. Desperate times. This is beekeeping. It's not a large market, and you just get who you get. All right, getting back to the questions, we've talked about burr comb and all that on the cages. And that this thing just jumped all over me. Careful with the ball jokes. We all saw what happened last time. Yes. And the thing of it is, anybody who knows me knows that if I actually meant it, I wouldn't say it. My mama did raise me to be like that, to where if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it all, except when it comes to Man Lake. So, sorry, I just couldn't help myself there. So, as far as is it BetterBee or Lysin coming? Is BetterBee or Lysin coming with a poly hive? Is it easier to do treatment with one, or maybe an attachment for under, so you're less likely to melt the hive? So the first question is maybe Lysin going to be able to bring their brand, or do you guys have what, Max? Is that another company, or is that your specific brand? Explain that to me, would you, David?
So BetterBee is the U.S. representative for Lysin, and we're also really their partners. I don't know if you've ever gotten an instruction manual from Lysin, but it tends to be either in Polish or in English that feels a lot like it's in Polish. So we work with them to make sure that the communication is clear, to provide all that support. And so whether any folks from Lysin are actually able to fly over and make the trip, BetterBee will be there and will be helping to represent all those products. But the polystyrene hives that we carry are the Lysin style polystyrene hive that they make, and that's actually BetterBee branded because that comes in through us.
Sure.
And then the Max hive is a separate polystyrene that we also carry. And as I understand it, we are 50% owners of the Max polystyrene molds, which means that we can make them and Dadat can make them. I think that's where it currently lies. So we're co-owners of that brand. But they're both really nice products. They're good for different things. The Lysin polystyrene hives are really nicely made. It's a good, resilient polystyrene. They nest very nicely on top of each other. And so if you want to have a whole hive system that's that nice, organized, tidy Lysin system, you can buy that. That's great. The Max hives are compatible with existing wooden Langstroth hives. So they look a little bit funny. You've got the big fat Max polystyrene and then the skinny wood, and then the big fat Max polystyrene and the skinny wood all stacked on top of each other. But the bee space, the internal cavity, is all basically going to be the same. So they can all sit on top of each other that way, and you can use them as your hive setup. And so that's nice if you've already got piles of wooden equipment and you want to be able to swap that in and out of the hive. The Max is a better polystyrene choice. If you just want to have something that all fits nicely together, it's got little metal latches on it that you can strap all your boxes together, then the Lysin is the way you go. So and I suspect probably both of those are going to make an appearance at the conference this coming year.
Especially if people pre-order, there's a greater likelihood. Absolutely. For sure. Now the Lysin, so you mentioned the Max was compatible with standard Langstroth. So is the Lysin not compatible, or is that? Or is
correct? The Lysin matches Lysin. It doesn't sync very well up with boxes because there's a sort of a little bit of a lip cut into the underside or the top of each of those boxes. They nest really nicely on each other, and they're not going to slide around or get out of square. But it means that if you try to put it on a wooden box, you might get gaps or the edge isn't going to be supported properly.
Okay. That's good to know. I have seen, well, you did bring one Lysin kit to the conference, if I remember. And did you guys stick that in the silent auction? Or was it somebody else? Yeah, I think you guys did. And I looked at it and it seemed like it was made really well. But unfortunately, I didn't have the time to take it apart and look at it like I would have liked to. But it did seem made really well from the outside. But that is something interesting for everyone to know who's wanting to do a combo. that the B Max would probably be the better option than for that.
Right. If you just want to try one or two polystyrene boxes, but be able to mix and match your other hive bodies in, then that'd be better. But the light, if you're a hobbyist, you don't have bees, or you're getting bees, or you just want to have a nice showy hive, the licensed polystyrenes are a really, really nice, sort of set. But you want to buy it as a set, you got to work it as a set.
The other part of their question was, is there an attachment or is there a technique to using either one of them? Your vaporizer would not necessarily cook the polystyrene.
We are working with Lysin to improve the design of those bottom boards to make it a little bit easier to go in and do an oxalic acid vaporization. There are ways that you can do it. So if you use the wand vaporizer instead of the gun vaporizer, then you can put that in and set it on top of the screen, and the screen isn't going to the screen in the bottom board isn't going to melt. You just can't touch the polystyrene as it's going in. So you can and then leave it in longer, let it really cool down before you pull it out. Now there's less chance for it to bump into polystyrene and melt it. For the gun, what I generally advise right now is use the nozzle in your gun through a piece of wood, and use that wood as your insulation, and then build a little piece of wood that's going to fit right over your entrance, or if you drill a hole, use that wood as the holder for the tube, and then just hold that up, or even screw that in to the hole that you've drilled on the outside, so that the metal is only ever going to touch wood and is never going to touch the polystyrene. So that's the best option I can give you now, but it is a thing that we're aware of and a thing that we're working on.
So that makes sense to me. I have not melted any polystyrene with my vaporizers, but I have put in one of the Paradise ones I have. I set the smoker on it for just a minute, and it still works fine. But it definitely has a caved in pit where that smoker was, and if I left it there a long time, who knows what would have happened. But
those caved in pits, be careful, because they will fill with water and then they'll freeze. I know it occasionally gets cold enough down there that you do have freezing weather.
Oh yeah,
and that those frozen little divots of water will absolutely expand and break that polystyrene. If you go, you'll actually find cracks down at the bottom after a couple of years. So it will pretty soon eliminate the lifespan of a polystyrene outer cover if you put a smoker on them, as we have learned on our own BetterBee hives more than once.
Yeah, it's so easy to do, especially if you're used to using
a metal top. Just set it on
a metal top.
Yep.
Just sit it down. Now I'm used to wooden tops or metal tops, but so this one was about the German videos. I believe that was made in the late 70s or early 80s. I know which one they're talking about those polystyrene hives that were green. Very good and well-made videos. Were those the same type that were used? I seriously doubt it, because Lysin was, I think, founded and created in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not sure when Lysin was founded.
I think I'm pretty sure it was not prior to the 90s. I could be wrong, but I don't think there's a good likelihood that they're the same type being used. However, it is interesting to note in that video how they have been using poly in countries like that, poly insulated hives, for 40 and 50 years or so. And it's much more commonplace over there. Insulation is something that we are starting to see more of a need for, as far as beekeepers wanting it. I think the bees have probably would have benefited from for a long time. I have done some testing myself with R5 and the Reflectix bubble, like you would insulate it's more of a reflecting material. It's like what Ian uses. I've used them on my videos, and a lot of people have asked me constantly about the Reflectix product, and the sealing of the lid and the insulation, I personally think makes a big difference during the most critical times of the year. There's certain times of the year where temps are ideal and everything, and it's not as big of a deal during that time. I've kept bees without insulation for almost 20 years, and some of my best honey crops came from hives that weren't insulated, but I've noticed over the last 3 years where I've really started to test it out that insulation can really help on those rough couple of weeks for buildup in the spring. And so I think we're going to start seeing more increased demand into not only fully insulated hives, but for those who are wanting to have, build their own equipment with wooden stuff or just use wooden equipment, to seeing beekeepers using upper insulation, maybe an R10 and some lids that have insulation built into them, because I personally think that it helps the colonies out a good bit. And it's not just from the cold winters, it's also from the heat in summer, which I have
That's exactly it.
Yeah,
I
and
think a lot of
summer
people,
it's bad here.
yeah, a lot of folks get really interested in insulation in fall, and they put it on all through winter, and they take it off in the spring. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a total misunderstanding of the benefit that it provides, because a honeybee colony is a fantastic climate control device. If you put a honeybee colony inside a box, it's going to make sure that box is exactly the right temperature it needs to be to keep brood alive and healthy for most of the year. And then if they don't have any brood, they're at least going to make sure it never gets, below freezing. They can control their temperature and their humidity. And there's a lot of moisture going in, there's a lot of moisture going out. And so all of that is the work of bees. It's bees buzzing their flight muscles, it's bees fanning their wings. And so if you've got a huge amount of heat pouring into a box, sure, the bees can keep it cool. It's not going to cook the brood, but they're going to have to work to do that. If you've got zero insulation on your hive and you put them in a box that was, made out of glass or something, and they were just losing heat all through the winter, they'd survive, but you'd have to give them 700 pounds of honey for them to eat as fuel. So they will do what they need to do, but there's no need to put your bees through that extra stress if you can avoid it. And I think insulation is one easy way that you could say, look, you guys would have survived in the 70s in an uninsulated box, and you might survive now, but we've got Varroa, we've got new pesticides, we've got different land use, we've got all these new stresses that you're dealing with. I might as well give you a little bit of a break and throw some insulation on top.
I think that was a good way to sum it up right there. And I didn't experience this. I wasn't around pre-Varroa, definitely not keeping bees. But prior to Varroa, tracheal mites, small hive beetles, some of the new viruses and other types of strains of things like nosema and whatnot, prior to all these stressors, bees did a lot better. It was easier for them to. In our lives and in any creature's life, it's really all about stress. Stress is the number one killer, whether it's stress from cancer in humans, whether it's nutritional stress, whether it's diet related stress, or usually a lot of times it's a combination of multiple factors, but there's a lot of variables there. With bees, our bees right now are dealing with more stress than they ever have in the history of our country and have more things going against them. We also have potential new threats like maybe Asian hornets eventually coming in, or Japanese hornets. Those are two different types, and those could come over here and chip away at even more percentages. So, like you said, what can we do as beekeepers to gain back a little bit of ground, reduce some stress for our bees? What can we do there? So insulation could be one of those answers. And I don't like having to, like with the Reflectix or an R5, I don't like having to pop a lid and go through an insulative board or an inner cover. I really liked back in the day when I didn't fool with those, but I have noticed a difference. And it's really not on the champs, those big behemoth colonies that have the massive clusters. They seem to be all right. But it's those ones that are kind of mid-range or small size that really do see an advantage. And I think the big ones do as well. But
it's just they're strong enough that they're resilient enough that you're not going to see them suffering as much, but they're still doing the work.
Yeah, they're just burning through more resources for sure. And my friend Etienne Tardif up there in the Yukon has some really good research on that. And it is my goal to have him at the conference this year because I think he'll be able to provide a lot of insight on some stupid cold weather. And he insulates like R40 on the lids. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just crazy talk, especially in Tennessee weather. But he's able to overwinter colonies with, large colonies with just 60 pounds of food, and they're clustered up for crazy amounts of time, longer than our winter put together. And, we get cleansing flights for, every now and then we'll go like 2 weeks without a cleansing flight. That's about it for us. But for him, it's a big deal. And not only is it cost savings as far as the bees not eating as much, but then it's the ash content, the roughage. The more the bees have to eat, the more buildup in their guts for that overwintering cluster that can't get out and relieve themselves. So as far as, I guess we've been stuck on this lysine and Bmax thing for a while, and other forms of insulation. But I do think that's going to be a trend that we'll be seeing more and more on the small professional down to the hobby level is more insulation. And I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think it can be done with a variety of budgets as well.
Right.
And for me, I'm curious to see more summer.
At the cheapest, you can take a wooden box and you can take a bunch of bales of straw and you can pile them up around it and pile them on top of it. And now you've created a much more insulated hive.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, some people have been bringing up peppermint oil for small hive beetle control, or just repelling them and keeping them away from the patties. Do you know anything about that, David? I've heard some rumors about that. I don't have any personal experience with peppermint oil and small hive beetles.
Unfortunately, I don't either. But very often, every 6 months, there's some new person who comes out and says, this weird plant is going to be the thing that kills Varroa mites. And most of the time it isn't. But occasionally it is. The hops beta acid in HopGuard kill Varroa mites. And it was just one of a zillion chemicals that people tried. And it turns out that they actually are not half bad at killing Varroa mites. They're not, amazing, but they're a useful tool to have in your arsenal for certain times a year. So I think in the same way that peppermint oil could be, but I haven't seen any evidence yet in favor of it.
So I think what I've heard is people saying that you can have a pollen patty and then put peppermint oil around it, and that will prevent small hive beetles from getting close to the patty and give you more time. I wonder though if that would not also be repulsive to honeybees and keep them from wanting to attack and consume the patty as quickly as well. And also what expense and what time is going into that. That's one of the things I found out with the, that no one has to jump on board on this or agree with me, but this is just all my opinion. But on the, I believe it's Hive. No, it's not Hive Alive. There's so many darn names that are all the same, for Pete's sake. Healthy Bees patties. They have the essential oils in there. And my opinion on them was, the small hive beetles didn't like them near as much, but neither did the bees. And the bees just, the reason I put a patty on is for brood rearing, and the bees did not beef up.
The bees don't eat it. You haven't achieved your goal.
Right. Or, if you put enough sugar on anything, the bees will eat it, whether it's good or not for them. And I really felt like the essential oils slowed brood rearing down, which kind of makes sense because one of the ingredients in there is a thymol, and which is when we treat with Apiguard, we do see a reduction in brood production, which is probably primarily related to blocking the pheromone production. I would say the communication of the colony. I don't know if that's all the reason, but
the whole process of thymol application, when you use something like Apiguard or Apolife Var, is that your bees are going up and they hate it. They're trying to remove it. They're grappling with it. They're scooping it out. They're carrying it away. And that's what's spreading it throughout the hive. They're actually trying to remove or either remove it or seal it up with propolis, because they don't want those fumes, vaporizing throughout the whole hive. So I think that you've probably got some good potential there. There are folks who are using menthol in patties of Crisco to try to help treat bees for tracheal mites too. And that involved much the same mechanisms. The bees would go up and they'd smell that menthol, but it would sort of agitate and upset them, and they do their best to remove that weird stinky substance from the inside of the hive. And so, I think you could do that. It would get them up there with the pollen patty, but I don't know if they'd be, in an eating mood. They might be, and let's get this stuff out of here. So I'd be, as you say, concerned, but it could very well work. And without good testing, we're not going to know. But make
Mhm.
sure it's rigorous and not just somebody selling peppermint oil telling you that you should buy theirs to keep your bees a little bit healthier.
So you mentioned HopGuard, beta acids, which is they HopGuard 1, 2, and now the latest version is
Three.
HopGuard 3. And what is your experience with HopGuard 3, limitations, pros, cons, that kind of jazz?
So I think HopGuard it's the right model. It's that you have an idea, you do science to test it, you figure out whether it works, and then you try to improve over time. I think the unfortunate thing is that they labeled it HopGuard 1 and then HopGuard 2 and then HopGuard 3, when I think they should have labeled it HopGuard, I wonder if this works. HopGuard, oh, I think we've probably improved upon HopGuard 1 a lot. And then the third one should have been called HopGuard, this is actually a pretty decent product. Because I think the first two iterations, it's they don't have all three on the market still. They stopped making 1 and 2 because 1 and 2 were not as good as 3. I've used some HopGuard. It is certainly a messy thing to apply. So, make sure you're wearing your gloves and that you plan to throw those gloves away afterwards. But it is an effective mechanism to kill Varroa mites if you understand the biology of the Varroa mites. In the same way that oxalic acid vaporization or an oxalic acid dribble is really a decent method for you to use when you've got 0 brood or very little brood. And it's a not fantastic method for you to use if you've got a whole lot of brood in your colony to actually knock the mite levels down from where they are. Just because most of the mites are not out and on the bees, they're under the brood caps, so they're not getting exposed to the treatment. HopGuard is very similar. If you've got brood in the colony, HopGuard is middlingly effective. You can, if you'll kill some Varroa mites, it's not gonna breed more of them. So clearly it'll have some effect, but it's probably not worth your money to use that in the middle of your brood period in the middle of the summer. If you've got a colony that just swarmed and so they're broodless, or if you pulled out a split and the split doesn't have any brood, or one half of the split doesn't have brood, capped brood, or if you've got a colony that's going into the fall or a colony coming in, into the spring and they've got very little brood, that would be a good time to reach for HopGuard as one of a number of different treatments.
Interesting. And as far as agitating the bees, did you see inclination for brood rearing still, or a result of suppressed brood rearing?
I haven't with HopGuard 3, and I'll confess that I've talked to people who use 1 and 2, but I've never used it. I saw some videos, but okay. I never used it myself. HopGuard 3, I have not seen major impacts on the brood rearing of the bees. I think they just seem to tolerate it and carry on with their business.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like it'd be a product that you'd have to really dial in on usage. We need mostly broodless, or we need to make some splits that have a semi-brood break to increase the effectiveness of the treatment, which really goes good with most type of treatments, because if we can be smart with our splits, we can get young queens, we can feed them and keep the nutrition up, and we can also hammer them with a treatment, a smart treatment, a thought out treatment. We're doing a combination of an effect here, and which is basically what the Varroa mites do to us. It's just not the fact that they're eating our bees. It's the fact they're injecting them with viruses and robbing our bees of nutrition as well, which depletes the colony in multiple ways. So combos working in our favor definitely won't hurt anything. So I had a question from a lady, Karen. She says, so using open screen bottom boards, does that cause the bees more stress / more work to control the temperature and humidity? Your thoughts on overwintering or screen bottom boards throughout the season, David?
I think it's ultimately going to depend on your local climate. If the increased ventilation makes your bees' job easier, then it's going to help. And if the increased ventilation makes their job harder, it's going to hurt. It seems like, I know that bees have survived perfectly well with open to the air screen bottom boards in frigid temperatures. So it's not like they can't do it. But the question is it helpful or something that they've got to do a little extra work to compensate for? They will clearly be able to get rid of excess moisture in a colony that's got an open bottom board in the winter. But they're probably going to use more honey. And that's ultimately the trade-off that a lot of winter management has to consider. If you're worried about the bee's ability to keep moisture from dripping down on them or to shed moisture, then you want to add ventilation. The more ventilation you add, the more heat loss there will be, and therefore the more honey they're going to need to eat. And so it's a balancing act that you need to strike, and it's going to be different in your latitude and your climate with your bees, with the contents of your honey, whether it's a high ash or a low ash honey might steer you more towards conserving, limiting the amount that they have to eat, or letting them eat as much as they'd like. I personally use screen bottom boards over top of a solid bottom board, flipped around the other way. And I leave my screen bottom boards on year round. And in the winter, I will stuff something in underneath the screen bottom board and basically seal in that area underneath it. But I'm going in there and checking regularly enough that I am perfectly happy to leave it open. The bees don't seem to suffer for it. I do know that if you live in an area where you've got more of a small hive beetle pressure, that's creating more of a chamber that's got brood detritus and wax caps and who knows what down in it, that a wax moth or a hive beetle can get into and start reproducing. So you do have to be mindful, if you've got that screen bottom board all the time, that you're keeping it clean, that you're monitoring it regularly, and otherwise I would switch to a solid one. But I would say if I was going to swap it out, I would swap it out for the winter. But I have open upper entrances on my colonies during the winter. And so I've already got some ventilation up there, so I don't need to worry about it down below.
And that's a topic that's really polarizing right there, at least to me.
Yeah.
I've heard some really heated stuff on upper ventilation, yay or nay. So I find it a really interesting topic, and one that really merits more research, in my opinion, because there can be a lot of variations. Screen bottom boards, closed, heavily reduced bottom entrance with an upper ventilation, or, for example, Etienne's up there in the Yukon getting -30s up down to -50s, which, again, stupid. We have technology to move. That's what I say. It's not that hard. So he likes it though, and he's an interesting fella. So that being said, he doesn't have upper ventilation up there. He keeps the snow cleared away from the colonies, and he runs screen bottom boards on some of his colonies. But what I think, like, I'm putting up a greenhouse this weekend. I've got the greenhouse up. I'm putting the plastic on. But we were talking about different things that can impact the greenhouses, and you have dead air flow, and you have airflow, and you have all kinds of different variations there. So my thoughts is, if you have upper ventilation, but you have a lot of like a screen bottom board or a very open entrance, if it's a strong wind, it's pushing and it's able to move that air up. But if there's nowhere for that air to go, then it's like when you roll down some car windows. If you roll down one and you're going pretty fast, and it makes that weird noise that it does because it can't flow through the car properly. And as some air is coming in, other air has to be forced out. Whereas if you had two windows open, it's now able to go in one side and push out the other. And so I would love to see more research in regards to that, because I've had people tell me in Tennessee, you cannot overwinter bees without an upper entrance during the winter. But yet I've done that for many, many years. But then there are also guys down here who are very successful who all use upper ventilation. And one guy that raises queens here that never closes his bottom boards during the winter as well. Ultimately, healthy bees going into the winter is the best thing that we can have. Right. But especially in areas that experience extreme cold, I think that's where it needs to be dialed in the most.
I think the key thing to keep in mind is that there are people using 20 different overwintering methods, configurations, ventilation schemes, insulation schemes, and all of them are having some success. Some of those bees are living through the winter. And so clearly it's not like having an upper entrance or not having an upper entrance is going to absolutely kill your colony or absolutely save them. Some of those people's bees die, some of those people's bees live. So we need to figure out how to improve upon it, but it's not like one is absolutely toxic to bees or absolutely going to save them no matter what else is going on, right? If you've got healthy bees, if you've got bees with the right preparations, you have a good understanding of sort of where they are going into the winter, you can make good predictions about how they'll come out, regardless of what your upper entrance looks like, or your whole hive roofing system looks like. but you can definitely improve upon things. And that's the mindset that we have to have as beekeepers. We're using Langstroth's box that he invented a little more than 100 years ago, and so it certainly works. It works a lot better than using skeps, but that doesn't mean we're done developing new bee technologies. Langstroth has given us convenient measurements, but if we make something out of new materials, or if we change some part of the configuration, it might very well hugely improve the outcomes for our bees. And we've got to be willing to test things. We've got to be willing to adopt new technologies or new designs, and we've got to be willing to fail, to try something and say, does this work better? Nope, turns out it works worse. Let's stop doing that. Let's go back to the old way for a while.
That's your job to see, that's the problem.
I got to figure it out, and then I'll just tell you what to do.
You researchers really don't understand your place in all this. You're supposed to figure everything out and tell us what to do. So we have all the answers.
If you ask clear questions, if you come to me and you say, David, I want to take this queen cage, I want to be able to use nothing but oxalic acid in my colony. So when do I put the queen in? When do I take her out? And when do I do the treatment so that's going to keep my mite levels at 0 all through the year? If that's the question, I can figure out an answer for it. But as I told the owners of BetterBee at one point, that soon after they hired me from Cornell, I moved here, came in, started work, and they said, I can't remember what the question was, but they said, could we do some science and answer that? And I said, oh, we can always do science and answer it, but you're going to need to give me infinite time, infinite money, and infinite research assistants and infinite bees. And if you can give me that, I can answer any question you've got. If there's a budget, if there's a time crunch, if I've got other things that you're expecting me to do, well, then we might have to have a conversation about whether that experiment is worth it. But I can always design an experiment to test something, given infinite bees and infinite time.
My rich uncle's fixing to kick the can. When he does and I inherit, I will get back with you on that research and availability of unlimited funds and bees.
Sounds good.
So I have some kind words on in regards to the licensed 6-frame nukes. Someone running almost 50 of them up there in New York has seen much increased survival rates up there in upstate New York. And I have a 6-frame insulated polystyrene hive, and he mentions or someone mentions that it makes a really good mini queen rearing colony, and I got to say yes, especially raising queens right now in Tennessee or March. It's really nice to have those insulated hives, just less stress on those colonies that really need to be focused on putting all that energy towards making royal jelly and babying those queen cells. I also want to say a big thank you to Steinthal Valley Honey, who's been a large supporter of ours over the years. Thank you very much for supporting this talk with David Peck. I have had a wonderful time learning more about different things, and also picking on David a few times. But, I find that, like, when we pick people to talk at our conference or do these interviews, I talk to them first. And if they can't take a joke, we just don't have them on. We just don't do that to ourselves. This is me actually acting professional here. So can you imagine? My poor wife can imagine. Lots of good comments. A lot of people are looking forward to getting to meet you at the conference, and hopefully, like you said, you'll be able to have a team so they can manage maybe the booth a little bit more, and you can chat,
circulate around, and
circulate a little bit more. However, I will warn you that based on projections and other things, we're looking at up to 1,500 plus people. So hopefully you'll be able to have a lot of energy. Bring plenty of coffee. And,
maybe you can buy me a scooter, and I can just scoot around and meet everybody real fast.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that we won't have to get any more paperwork done to have one of those things. The paperwork is insane.
The venue was mad enough about folks trying to carry boxes out the front door, so I guess me riding around on a scooter could get you in trouble.
That really bothered me. We've had some conversations with them about multiple things. I'm excited to say that since we had last year and it was very successful, it has given us a whole lot more pull in regards to what we can put our foot in the ground and say, we got to have this. Now, that doesn't mean we always get it, but instead of them saying this is what we'll do and that's it, they'll actually move a little bit on stuff. So we're hoping to make things a lot better for everybody in regards to the entire experience, which seem to go pretty well, but going pretty well is not good enough.
Just like beekeeping, there's always room for improvement.
There's always room for improvement. And yeah, you can't bring drinks, but we will have what we're looking right now is we've kind of given them an ultimatum. So this is Laurel didn't say I could not say what we're doing. So I approached them and said, hey, we have all these people coming, they're going to be buying mills. And one thing we're looking into this coming year is having the option of two prices, one with the mills and one without. And that way, some people, especially families that want to bring 3 or 4 people or so, their homeschool family, 9 or 10, and that's a good bit of expense added up. And so if you can, cut the mills out, you can save a good chunk of change. So we've told them, I'm like, hey, we want a discount on coffee, and if not, we're going to give people the option. We still may do that anyways, but we're trying to get them to work with us and play ball, because last year we couldn't have much coffee for everybody. It was just going to be too expensive. I calculated it was going to cost us almost $13,000 to have a halfway decent amount of coffee and tea for everybody, and we couldn't afford that. But and this year, gosh, it's going to be probably 19,000 at their price for just coffee and tea. And there's only one caterer. So we're working hard to ensure that vendors like BetterBee are going to be able to come down and find it more than worth their time, because it takes a lot to come down to one of these shows. It takes a lot of planning. And then if we're talking license, getting semi-involved, and I'm not saying they'll send representatives for an example, but just it takes a lot of thought process, a lot of work, getting trucks loaded and the logistics of it all. It takes a lot for vendors to come. And I think that's why at a lot of conferences, you don't see a lot. So it's important that we go above and beyond for the vendors. And we appreciate you guys doing what you guys did, especially you, because we weren't planning on using you for a speaker, but it ended up happening. And boy, that really helped. And I remember thinking, because Ian wasn't able to come down, and I was like, crap. Because I think, again, it was like a week before the event. And I understand that things happen. And one thing I have this year is I have a speaker or two on like a kind of a backup reserve. And
terrific.
So I'm going to be like paying them to come like at a lower price rate, just expenses and a few extra things, just to be there, kind of a retainer speaker. And but yeah, I was like, and the thing was, okay, I can find somebody to speak, but can I find somebody that won't be a complete idiot? That's hard. Or boring. And so, people were really mesmerized by your talk. I think primarily because of how the lighting gleamed off of your forehead. But sorry, David, I promise that's my last bald joke. I swear. But regardless, so that all said, we've had I've had a blast anyways, having you on tonight. We've had several good conversations, I feel like, through email and phone since the conference. I had a wonderful time with the conference. I did it on my part. And so it's been a pleasure getting to meet you. Is there anything else that, you'd like to say about BetterBee or things this year, or a tidbit you'd like to leave people with, David?
Well, I would like to thank you for having me, and say that I have likewise really enjoyed the sort of formal and informal conversations you and I have had since I met you coming out of the conference. But it has been a great pleasure working with you. I really think that what you're doing with the Hive Life Conference is an excellent opportunity for you. And the fact that it's an annual thing, to sort of annually sit down, take stock, say, who are the voices we need to amplify? Who are the people we need to bring together? How can we come together as a community of folks who are trying to keep our bees healthy, trying to do well, and work together in that way? I think that you've really got an excellent program organized. You've got an excellent philosophy behind it, and I think that there are other folks who would get into this with a different mindset, and it would show, and it would sort of be squandered. You want to make sure that the people who come have a good time, get what they're paying for. You want to make sure that the vendors who come, it's not a waste of their time. You want to make sure that the speakers who come are interesting to the folks who listen, but it's also worth the speaker's time, because no speaker wants to give a boring lecture that everybody hates, and then they get 2 dry claps and a cough, and then they walk off and go back to their hotel room. So, you're working really hard, and you're prioritizing all the right people in all the right ways. So I do think you've gotten an excellent, it's been an excellent start the first couple of years. And I do think that as it grows and expands, you're increasingly going to be able to, build upon the good traditions of success you've had, and anything that you did that you didn't like, you can just change it the next year. No, it's been great talking to you. I think my main takeaway would just be, if you've ever got any questions, you can ask us up at BetterBee. If you've ever got a product idea, you can ask us up at BetterBee. If you've ever got a complaint about anything that we're doing or anybody else is doing, you can contact us. I can't guarantee that I can make the product that you want. I can't guarantee that I can, make your bees, live through the winter if you haven't been taking care of your mites all summer. But I can certainly talk you through what you're looking at. And I think what I really value about the company, the reason I took the job, and this was what I asked my beekeeping mentor and my research mentor, Tom Seeley at Cornell. I said, I got offered this job at BetterBee. It seems like it's a really interesting, cool opportunity. They've made this job, Director of Research and Education, that I think is really going to let me do the good stuff that I want to do and help people in a meaningful way. And he said, if any other company had offered you a job like that, I would say, I'm not sure it's the right one for you. I'm not sure it's got the right philosophy. I'm not sure it's compatible with you as sort of a scientist and a researcher, in addition to being a real beekeeper. But he said, but BetterBee seems different. And so he says, I really like them. And I think that if anyone was going to give you that job, they're the ones to do it. So that has proven true for me. Having jumped from academia into the beekeeping industry side of things, I still feel like I'm able to be a scientist, but I'm also able to talk with folks like you and really help to improve the world of beekeeping in the U.S. for bees and for their beekeepers. Well, so I'm happy to continue doing that as time goes by.
Well, I think it's really fascinating to see the researcher in your position, because I've never seen anything like that before. And so, but then again, it's really hard to gauge if you're actually doing a good job, because maybe somebody else in the same position would light it up better. I'm just messing. But at the same time, you mentioned the conference, and thank you for the kind words. I guess I should stop picking on you, or you'll stop talking good about our conference. But
all I'm doing now is I'm trying to figure out the best possible fundraiser that you could do for the conference, where if we raise enough money, then the people who've made the biggest donations get to come up and shave your head live on stage on day 2 of the conference. So I think there's a lot of opportunities here to help support
a lot of opportunities. Oh my goodness. My wife was,
I don't know how much fundraising you've done for the scholarship program that you were trying to get set up for the 2023 conference, but I feel like a fundraiser based on you shaving your head could be a pretty darn good way to bring in some money. I give a couple bucks to that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would give a couple bucks to see me have my head shaved at the Hive Life conference. And actually, we had just passed $7,000 in donations for the whether it was silent auction revenue or whatever it was towards the child sponsorship. So there's a company right now who's pledged $2,000 more on top of that. So it should be 9,000 very soon. Just got that news recently. So that's going to be able to give several kids, and I'm sure that will continue to grow between now and then, to get them in free hotels, free meals for them, and probably get a specialized T-shirt, because that's, as you know, if we can get young people involved, there's so much potential there, because they can learn things that we know now in our 30s at 15 or 14 or whatever. And it's an exciting prospect to get some regeneration and into the beekeeping industry. And those young men and women are already out there. We just want to give them a leg up. And I think what makes really the Hive Life conference tick is really not myself or really any individual, but it's a fact that we're trying to build a community here. The community has really already been built, but now take it to a conference level and bring in those who will build upon that. And we really try to focus on keeping the egos out and let's focus on what's going to help us all and make a difference. And whether we're a professional minded beekeeper or we are just wanting to literally have 3 to 4 hives, something that's meaningful, whether that's in a educational way, whether it's in an exciting getting to see new products from BetterBee that are innovative, like that excluder, whatever it is. We want that community to be real and to be beneficial. And if it's not, then we want our conference to implode because otherwise it is not serving its purpose any longer. But
that's really the same philosophy as BetterBee. If we can't make money being an ethical company that takes care of bees and takes care of beekeepers, then we'll find some other way to make money and we'll close our doors. So that's the goal, and I think we've done a pretty good job so far and plan to keep doing it.
Well, like I said, I'm gonna have to do some business with you guys. I regretfully have never have, and so that will change. And
well, I heard you complaining about veil designs from some other suppliers, so you and I can work together. I'm gonna find the perfect veil for you, and if I can't find it, we're gonna find a way to make the perfect veil for you.
Well, that'll be an interesting challenge. I'm sure that you could figure it out, or somebody could over there. So. In regards to that, our conversation, I'll fill people in really quick. So we talked prior to this chat, and go over a thing or two, which we haven't done half of what we said we were going to in that conversation. But hey, that's the story of my life. And we talked about veils, and someone was asking me my opinion on, hey, Kamon, Guardian Bee Apparel veil, Man Lake type veil. What about your Ultra Breeze that you have? What about this company or that company? What do you think about these bee suits and these veils? And I just responded, and pardon my French, I said they suck. The veils stink, and I know that from a shipping standpoint, having the fold up veil, the fencing veil, makes a lot of sense in regards to shipping, because you can fold them up with the jacket or whatever and put them in a little bag and ship them very cost effective. And on a shipping container, getting them from wherever country they come from, or even within the United States, it's cheaper. I get that. However, the whole darn reason of it is twofold: protection and visibility. And some of them, all of them seem to protect pretty good. I haven't had one that I've been stung through unless it was literally touching my face. Mm-hmm. So, but that some of them are now like this far away from my face and they're looking downward. And then, like, I was driving my truck yesterday, trying to look over my shoulder, and I've been making splits, and it was late at night. And for those of you who have made splits after dark, I hate night bees. They don't fly, they crawl, and it isn't, if there's a spot that big, they will find a way to get into your suit.
They walk and sting and walk and sting and walk and sting.
They're like assassins at night. It's incredible. So I'm in my truck trying to look back, and my veil's still looking like this. And so I'm looking into mesh over here, and Laurel threw me something today in my jacket, and that fencing veil has that rim around the sides. Your peripheral vision stinks. So she threw me something, and it was coming at me right in that area. I turned my head to adjust it, but unless you rotate your whole body, it doesn't go with you. And I have a bruise. So I've just got to say that somebody needs to make a better bee veil out there. I have one that I got from Kelly's years ago.
Have you tried the hat style veils?
Yeah. So let me grab something real quick if you have a moment.
Give your veils. Let's solve this problem here. We're gonna solve Kamon's veil problem right here, right now, everybody.
This right here is really,
then maybe you'll stop complaining about
special to me. So we have a canvas hood right here, and this is my favorite type of veil, and I wear them a lot. Like when I'm not wearing a jacket, if I'm doing queen rating, I'll just Man Lake does have a type that's like this, but they keep changing stuff, which seems to be their MO, and it's never the stuff I want changed. But so I like this for the sheer fact. And when I started my YouTube channel, this was all I wore. And a lot of people said, Kamon, why in the world are you wearing that piece of garbage? The visibility out of this sucker is 6 to 10 times better than anything else that I have. It's amazing. And originally it was out like this. This was made in Clarkson, Kentucky by the Kelly Manufacturing Company. And it's got a nice, I don't know how well you can see that, but it's got a nice,
yeah, that's coming through well.
No bee is getting through that. But I can see much better this compared to my Ultra Breeze. I probably can fit 5 of their holes in the side of one of these. And also, as you will notice, that it is not black, it is a matte finish. It does not reflect a fraction of the sunlight that a lot of valves do. And so, and also the fact that I don't think that we should get rid of fencing valves. I think they're nice to fold up, but I think there should be more options available like this, because I turn my head and it goes with me. And the fencing valves do not do that. And so, and the peripheral vision is very good. Obviously, you can see over time it has warped to a degree. However, this thing's almost 20 years old. It was the first bee valve that I ever purchased, and it's still good and mostly solid. It's got a couple holes down here in this mesh where I've gotten too close to a smoker or a barbed wire fence catching a swarm on the other side of it, or whatever. And if I would have not left this thing out for months at a time in the sun, I probably could have gotten 30 to 40 years out of this sucker. Now, I imagine to get something this high quality, you're going to have to pay a pretty good price these days. But if you can get a couple decades and see what's going on, I'll pay the money. I'll be the first customer. And it's an issue. I don't know why the heck we don't have better veil options in this industry. So there you go, David.
Yeah. It is the chamber in which we put our own heads, and might very well spend an entire day. And if we're out there working the bees from dawn until dusk,
for sure.
And so it is worth an investment in a slightly higher quality veil if it's giving you a better experience.
So,
yeah,
I was just going to say, Man Lake has, when they purchased Brushy Mountain, they did kind of get their clear view valve, which is somewhat similar to this. It is round and does have a mesh, but every time they change or order a new batch, it seems like they tighten the screen on it, and it gets tighter and tighter. It's not near as big as what it used to be. And it is nice that it still rotates. But I have talked to Man Lake over years over the fact that you cannot get their round valve mounted onto a ventilated jacket or a ventilated suit. They just refuse to do it. And I'm like, literally, you'd have a decent product if you could just do that. But Man Lake doesn't think in beekeeping terms anymore, unfortunately. And honestly, I've sold, and anyone can talk to Man Lake. You literally can call Man Lake up and say at the Clarkson facility and say, Kamon Reynolds, how many of these valves has he sold for us? Hundreds. And it's not like I've literally said, you need to buy this valve. It's just, I wear it all the time and people want to know where they get it from. And then they go and get one. And a lot of new beekeepers have issues with seeing eggs and stuff for the first time, especially if you don't have the greatest eyesight. And sometimes they think it's their fault. Some valves, I've been seeing eggs and larvae for decades. Some valves, especially at certain lighting times of the day or certain angles of the sun, I don't care if you have experience or not, very difficult to see. In a valve like this, it's a game changer. So we can see some improvement there. So David, now that you have totally volunteered, and I know you have all this free time, the next time we talk, I don't want to hear anything except Kamon. I've got the latest and greatest.
Kamon, your veil is in the mail.
That is right.
Well, I'm going to make a note, figure it out. So one of the nice things about BetterBee is that the BetterBee jackets that we carry are really, they're entirely controlled by us. They're made by a company in India, and it's a company in India not because that's the cheapest, outsourciest way we can do it. It's because Bob Stevens, the original founder of BetterBee, was in the Peace Corps. And in the Peace Corps, he actually served in India, maintaining and building U.S. interests over there. And he built relationships with these people. And he said, look, you guys need economic development. I need somebody who can make these veils with us. And the company there has really grown as BetterBee has grown. So it's not just some cheap outsource, sewing machine mill. It's really these partners that we've been working with for years, making good, high quality beekeeping equipment. And when we say, hey, we don't like the zipper quality, we only want you to use high quality zippers, they go, all right, great, we'll do that. And they
That's
fold it
awesome.
into the price and we get the product we want. And so if we said, hey, we need you to make veils with these specs, but we need them to be able to be zipped onto or off of all of the other jackets that we carry so that somebody can swap 10 different veils between them, they'll go, perfect. Yeah, we can make sure that we meet your design specs. So we can definitely work and see if there's a way that we can improve some of the veiling options. And that's the cool thing about BetterBee, is that I know if I go into the office and I say, Kamon was, whining on YouTube about how he wants to have veils with these properties, they'll go, look,
I know.
how many of them do you think we could sell? As long as it's not going to cost an arm and a leg to get them to make one custom veil for you. But if we can have them make 700 of them, and then 700 beekeepers will be a lot happier and will be able to see a lot better, I think we're happy to do it.
Well, I think that hopefully at our conference is a place where maybe a product like that or two can be felt out amongst the populace, and
Yep.
bring a couple if there was something like that, or another type of product, and see what people's response are to them. And honestly, a product like this, I really feel like it's just a matter of trying it on and just using it in the hive one time. You totally see the difference. And I have good eyesight, so I got 19/20 vision, so I don't have any issues with visibility, but it still affects me. It makes me wonder with people that have to deal with hot summer days with glasses or different other things, how much more of an asset that could be, or just people that, are elderly and maybe have a little bit of an eyesight issue. So
absolutely,
I think that, the core of our beekeeping relates around our vision. And I just don't understand why that hasn't been addressed to more of a degree. I understand there's some issues there, but what makes me think of awesome times in beekeeping is, back in the day when Kelly's first came about, and it was started by Walter T. Kelly. And while he was there, it was all focused around, we are making products for beekeepers. We are beekeepers. We understand their needs. We listen to their needs. Needs are met. Man Lake, originally very similar story, and it took them to greatness. Unfortunately, the new owners really have a disconnect with that. And I would argue Dayton is in the same boat, just because generations have gone by without a connection. So again, I have never heard anything bad about BetterBee. So not that I'm trying to plug you guys. It's just because if you guys started really stinking, and then you just, like you said, you kind of have it coming.
We deserve any criticism that came our way.
And I have some people that get a little ticked off that I even talk about companies in this manner. They would want me to really just focus on education, but I feel like this is education of a different sort. And if beekeepers do not understand that every time we buy a bee product, we're voting for more of the same. And so if we're buying products from companies that literally will not listen to us and are changing formulas of things, or taking veils that were nice, and because they literally told me when they shrunk the screen size, well, they could save a little bit on the screens. Well, that's fantastic. They can make a little bit more money while our visibility gets thrown into the crapper. So who ultimately, you've got to put your money in areas that are going to serve the beekeepers if you want to get something better. So I will definitely be looking more at BetterBee. Did you have you said you guys have BetterBee veils and suits there that I've never even seen a picture of your veils and suits, but maybe you guys already have something nice. I don't know.
We could very well. Well, check out the website, take a look at the options that are there. If you see something that you like, I'm happy to talk to you about it. We don't even have to film it. You can just call me. But if it doesn't work, let me know, and we'll see if we can't figure out, maybe the next order we make, we'll say, why don't we try out something new that might actually meet the needs of some beekeepers who don't feel like their needs are being met. But that's basically true of anything. You can call us up, and we don't have a call center. It's a bunch of very nice folks who meet together in the office every day, answer phones, talk to customers, answer questions. And if you say, hey, I'm an extra large customer, do you have any extra large jackets? They'll run up into the loft and they'll look around and figure out what we can offer and take measurements. But if you call and you say, hey, I want to place an order with you guys, you might talk to Suzanne. You can say, Suzanne, how are your bees? and she'll tell you all about her bees. You might have to ask her to stop because you really wanted to get that order placed. But we're the whole philosophy of BetterBee is that we're beekeepers serving beekeepers. And so, if you want to talk to a beekeeper about something and say, hey, when you use this veil, how do you like it? How do you find it? Do you find that it gets in your way? Does it seem like it, the mesh, gets all rumpled, or do you feel like the fabric sticks to your head and makes you all sweaty? We'll give you an answer. If somebody says, oh, I don't use that veil, hang on, let me find somebody in the office who does, you'll get a clear answer. So that's the philosophy. It's a lot more fun to run a company that way, that we say, hey, everybody, turn off the phones, turn on the answering machine. We're all going to go out and do hive inspections together. And we want to show you this new product, or we want to make sure everybody goes out and has seen a queen this month. So
for sure.
It's a fun way to run the company.
All right. I'm going to let you go, I promise, but I have one more thing that I plan to do with you while you're here. I must ask. These are a BetterBee product. You brought them to me at the conference. I asked if I could try some, and you graciously remembered and gave me this pack of those virgin queen cells. Now, the idea behind this is if you have some virgin queens I prefer using queen cells, so you let them naturally emerge into the mating nuke, and that's great. But sometimes you end up with extra queens, or things happen. Your son gets stung and you have to go take care of it. And then you have some virgins running around. I couldn't find online, but I'm imagine you would dip this slightly in some very thin beeswax on this tip, and they have to chew through that. Is that correct?
Right. So what we recommend is, if you've got a piece of foundation with you, if you've got a pile of Burkham kicking around, you can just use that. I recommend that instead of dipping, you just take the solid wax, get it warm between your fingers, and then press that over the outside. And that's gonna cover things over and get the queen locked in there. Okay.
And so we're talking not a really thick layer, like, past 1/8 of an inch.
No, I mean, she's already chewed her way out of a cell. And so now you're just asking her to do it one more time, but you're essentially trying to replicate the cap on a queen cell. So it shouldn't be all that much.
Okay. So that'll be something that, as we start queen rearing here in the next week, if I run into any virgins, I'm going to be trying these out this year. Actually, my friend Gus Mitchell, who's asked some of the questions, and also actually has a YouTube channel now. He suggested I get some of these to try. Now that you have your own YouTube channel, Gus, you need to be doing this yourself. But I'm interested to see, because I really hate fooling with virgins. They're a lot more finicky, especially upon introductions. And a lot depends on, like, if it's a great honey flow day, one of those perfect days of spring, you can almost just run her in the entrance and you're golden on a smaller mating nuke. But during robbing times of the year, where they have a hard time accepting anything like that, that's where I'm wondering if this can help me save a couple virgins and get some mating nukes. So
interesting. Yeah, I haven't tried queen cell introductions during dearth like that, but I think that very well could work. And if it doesn't, let me know. And if it does or it doesn't, let me know. And either way, we can put that in the item description on the website so that folks know. Say, Kamon Reynolds says that you should try it this time. Yeah. It works really great.
Yeah. Well, Kamon Reynolds.
And if you don't know who Kamon Reynolds is, he's that bald guy who you saw famously shaved at the Hive Life.
His hair never grew back. I have a friend that happened to, by the way.
They shaved it off and it never came back.
They had some type of bet, and they shaved him all the way down with a razor and everything. And his hair never came back quite right. And he had some thick hair too. So he's kept it shaved.
Hopefully that won't happen to you when we shave your head.
Yeah, that's my concern right there. I mean, that's like my best feature, is that slick. I kind of go for that 50s slicked hair look. You take that away from me, what do I have? Well, David, we could talk all night. It's always fun getting to talk bees with you, or just other things in general. So super appreciate your time. Looking forward to doing things with you in the future, and seeing you at the Hive Life conference presenting, and also being there with BetterBee. So buddy, thanks for your time. If you ever need anything, you know how to get a hold of me, and we'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Likewise. I'll see everybody later. And if you ever have any reason to come visit us up at BetterBee, we're always happy to see you and to talk to you about bees.
Sayonara. Thanks, David.
See ya.